Welcome to Boris FX Live. Sponsored by Dell Precision Workstations. Create without limits. And by NVIDIA. And Intel.
Well, welcome to Boris FX Live. I'm Ben Brownlee, and we have got another giant show today. I'm going to be talking to Jesse Newman, a high-end VFX artist, about his work, his bag of tricks, and how he approaches projects, including the Rebirth of GAEA that we have just been taking a quick peek at. We'll also be talking to Nick Haraz, who is going to be back to talk about his new podcast, Flow State, about the secrets of creativity and finding that creative spark. And later we will be watching how Jesse works with After Effects and Sapphire filters to create modern art. So this is Boris FX Live, which means we are live and we want you to be involved too. And there are a number of ways that you can do that. If you're watching on YouTube or on borisfxlive.com, then come and join us in the chat. Just to the right-hand side of your viewer, you will see a chat window. Type your little questions, your little comments, all in there, all your big questions, whatever the mood takes you, and we will definitely be asking and answering those live today. All right, just as Brian is doing right there. Look at that. See, just live hello. There's another good reason to be on borisfxlive.com. And that is, of course, to join our competition. So we're going to be giving away some good prizes again today. All you have to do is type your name, email address, and details in the contact form, or the competition form, I should say, at the bottom of borisfxlive.com, and you will be in for a chance to win one of our great prizes. And what are we giving away today? Well, we have got a 1-year subscription of Sapphire, the whole Sapphire suite. Look at that annual subscription, a $495 value going away to one lucky winner. And we're also going to be giving away an annual subscription to the Boris FX Suite. So that's everything that we make, including Sapphire, that we're going to be looking at a little bit later today, but also Continuum, Mocha Pro, Optics, and Silhouette. So this is a huge prize that we're going to be giving away. Full terms and conditions can be found on borisfxlive.com. I'd also like to take a second to thank our sponsors as well, NVIDIA, Dell, and Intel, for helping us put these live streams together and giving us the elastic bands that we need to keep all of this thing running in shipshape and Bristol fashion. Dell Precision Workstations, the #1 workstation brand in the world. So thanks very much to all of our sponsors for all of their help in getting this together. Okay, well, I think that's probably a good place to start. I think without any more further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest if he's ready. So Jesse Newman. Jesse Newman is. Hello, Jesse. How you doing? I'm going to give you a bit of blurb if I can remember this. I've memorized this. So tell me if anything's wrong. Okay. Right. Jesse Newman is a high-end visual effects artist and an actual artist. And we will talk about the difference between those, or the similarities between those, a little bit later as well. So some of the projects that he's worked on are now part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art and the Whitney Museum of American Art. You'll have seen some of his work in Hollywood blockbusters like Justice League, or you might see his work in his role as creative director for the Super Bowl 55 and the augmented reality graphics there. You'll also have seen his work if you've watched any of our Boris FX demo reels. We have been very happy to slip some of his shots in there as well. So we're going to be talking later about how your continuing artwork, Rebirth of GAEA, is and how you create that. I don't know whether to call it multi-format art. What would you call it?
What do you mean by multi-format? You mean that in the sense that it's
I've
video?
no idea. I've no idea. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Well,
So I was trying to think.
first
Okay,
of
it's
all,
not multimedia because that sounds very, very 90s, and it's not that at all. So
yeah. Well, first, Ben, thank you for having me. This is going to be fun. It's kind of hard to define it because it keeps changing. It started off as Rebirth of GAEA started off as just like a weekend project 15 years ago, and it's still evolving. It was going to be just a small photo composition, and then it turned into a really massive one, and then it turned into video. And I guess I would say that it's digital art, and it's, multi-layered is kind of an understatement. There's an insane amount of layers that go into it. And it kind of took on a life of its own once I started building it and seeing what the possibilities were. I can give you. Do you want me to give you a quick overview of how it started?
yeah, I think that's let's start there. That's probably a good idea to start there.
Okay.
Just
Rebirth of
what
GAEA
is it?
Is it's a massive digital tapestry. Essentially, within the industry, you call it like a matte painting, but for those who are not in the industry, or it's basically just a combination of a lot of different vignettes, and each vignette has its own story, and it's all rooted in Greek mythology. So it started back in 2006. My daughter was kind of being made fun of at school because she was really into the Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson books. And so I wanted to empower her as a Greek goddess. I didn't know anything about Greek mythology. And so I just started looking into it. And, I had heard of Athena and, Zeus, but that's about it. So I found out that there was a goddess named Gaia who was associated with Earth, and my daughter was really into the environment and that sort of thing. So it started off with me just grabbing some fruit from the kitchen, put it on her head, and taking a couple photos, thinking that would be it. It'd be like a long weekend project, and then I think later for Christmas or her birthday, I got a set of CDs on Greek mythology, like a college course that we would listen to going, whenever we were driving. And when I started listening to all of the stories that were contained within the mythology, it just had my mind was like on fire with all these different ideas. I mean, the first one that kind of, I think, grabbed me was the idea of Daphne, who's this priestess who kind of forms into a tree. And and so I quickly was thinking, well,
begins with its
I don't necessarily need to put her. Wait, is that audio coming?
Brian, we're hearing the audio.
Apologies. That's okay. I didn't need to. I realized I could take it much further than just putting the fruit on her head and taking a couple photos. So I kept it as a secret from her for those 6 years I was working at it, and I would ask her just to kind of pretend she was a tree or pretend this or that. And so as I learned more about Greek mythology and all of the incredible imagery that's in the stories that are contained, it just grew into this opportunity for me to kind of, I guess, stretch out creatively and without any limitations. I mean, that's the nice thing about a personal project is that there doesn't have to be a deadline, so it continued to evolve as I heard more stories and did more sketches. And then, like I said, it continues to evolve to this day. I'm still working on the video. I'm still tweaking some of these different vignettes. The one that's on screen right now is on the top left. That's my mom in the top left. And I had just redone that one about 6 months ago. When I was redoing the video, I had done the video about 10 years ago, but when I was looking back over it, I realized that there was a lot more potential within it. I had already had a camera move kind of drifting over the image. But then I kind of, at the time in 2012 was, it's not like I ran out of time, but more that I needed to, take some paying jobs because this, so I kind of put this on hold for what ended up being about 10 years. And when I revisited it recently, it just, again, the way that Rebirth of GAEA has continued to function is that it's it just continues to evolve right in front of my eyes. I had the camera move, and I was thinking, oh, I could just put some stars in the background and add some depth. And then, when she's bursting out, I could have try some fluid dynamics, and one thing led to another, I'm still, I wanted to make it 4K instead of the HD that was 10 years ago, and that sort of thing. That's kind of like a brief intro.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely stunning as well, and you've got this printed out, or a version you have printed. Like how big is this image when it's printed?
The first print that I showed back in 2012 at the New York Art Expo was 4 feet by 12 feet, and the image itself is 30,000 pixels by 10,000 pixels. And I did it all in After Effects. I would like to mention that I'm not a very technical person, and I think that it's worth mentioning because I didn't really know that back in 2007 on my laptop that you weren't really, it wasn't really meant to do a 30,000 by 10,000 image, but with enough patience and kind of poking around, I was able to figure it out. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely gonna come back to a lot of that stuff because that's really interesting. Isn't the word like bemusing? I think.
Yeah, it's we'll come back to that because I think it's important to touch on. I think it can be sort of empowering for people to know that you don't have to be a computer science degree. You have a computer science degree to do all these things. I don't know really how to script and that kind of thing. But the print was 4 feet by 12 feet. And I have a couple, 3 other versions that were 3 feet by 9 feet. Now, at the time, the plan was to do limited edition prints. But even the 3 foot by 9 foot print, when I was redoing the video just 6 months ago at 4K, and I had the camera drifting around, some of my kids who walked by the print every day, for the last 10 years, hadn't seen, some of these details, and that's because a lot of these vignettes are kind of nested within other vignettes, and so something that might be able to be printed out, 3 foot by 3 foot, would actually on the bigger, as an individual vignette, it might be 3 feet by 3 feet, but in the bigger piece, it's actually just a small, like 1 inch by 1 inch. So it's, despite it being the final print being massive resolution, you can actually, that's what the video is really helpful for, because I can, nest the composition into the overall composition. So as the camera's drifting toward it, transitions to the other, the close-up composition, and you can see those details as well.
I mean, that's something I'm definitely going to be coming back to as well, is just the amazing, actually astounding amount of detail and thought that's been put into every little small section. But I mean, coming back a little bit away from GAEA, we're going to be talking about this a little bit later. I'd like to talk a bit about you, like where did you start, and when did you start as well?
I graduated from college in '96, and I had a degree in digital image making. It was a degree that I created the name for because up until my senior year, I hadn't taken any classes. I graduated without even having an email. I know that sounds so antiquated at this point, but it's true. And so when I graduated, I had taken maybe 2 classes. One was in Avid editing, and one was Photoshop and Illustrator. And at that point, though, I mean, it's really hard for professors to keep up, and so I had. I think the professors were doing a good job, but at the same time, they were learning all this as the students were. So a lot of my roommates and I were kind of sharing with each other, hey, check this out. I can, and it was very, very simple what we were kind of bragging to each other about, like I can take an image and rotate it, that kind of thing. So when I graduated in '96, I moved out to California. I worked at a company called Cafe FX for a couple years. And and then I was in Atlanta at Spin for a couple years, and then moved up to New York. And I've been freelancing in New York off basically for about 20 years, 20 years now. And just to, I think it's important to mention that when I was a senior in college, the same month that I first opened up Photoshop, I found out that I was going to become a father. And I was an art major. And so I was used to communicating visually, like sharing ideas. And I was always, it's funny, there's a section on my website called Connecting the Dots. And I redid my website about a year ago. And in the process, or over this past year, I'm still working on it. But in the process of redoing the website, it occurred to me all these sort of connections that I hadn't realized before. And one of them was I hadn't realized that I came across Photoshop the same month that Emma, that I found out, my daughter was, that I was going to become a father. And so I had all of this inspiration that I needed to express in some way. It was a very, paradigm shifting month. So it's important to mention that for me, because it's been a very integral part of my professional development, has been my desire to create artwork for her, or before she was even born, to kind of share some of these ideas and emotions visually, just kind of, through Photoshop, which I know it's really hard maybe to put it into context to someone who's didn't start back then. But, I was 20 years old before I was able to do any artwork, and then I had an undo button. And so it's really
Yes.
A big difference, because you can imagine, I was using colored pencils up until senior year in college. And, if you mess up, you mess up. There's no going back with, you can try to smudge things and stuff, but so having, the undo button, and then that was before Photoshop even had layers. And so every time that they've added these more, these new features, it just, to me, it's like, oh, this is incredible. I still try to retain that sort of perspective. But basically, when my daughter was little, I would have liked to spend a little bit more time with her, and I wanted to create artwork for her so she would not remember, but hang on her wall and that kind of thing. So I would I'd go to work and work on those projects, but then I would kind of come home and create artwork for her. And those personal projects are really what kind of propelled my professional career. And then they really worked nicely in tandem with each other, because professionally, I would be pushed in a direction that I wouldn't have necessarily gone if I was just in a vacuum doing my own things. And so then I would be, I might learn a little bit of 3D, or I might learn a little bit of, green screen or something like that I wouldn't have done, for my daughter. And then they just went back and forth. And there's so many examples when I'm looking back and connecting the dots of, for example, there's a birthday card for her where I replicated her around the playground. And then a couple, around the same time, I was doing the Verizon It's the Network commercials, where duplicating hundreds and hundreds of people behind the test man. And so there was a lot of interesting parallels between my optional and personal work. Yeah, this was a fun one that you brought up right now. This is... Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, this is. Oh no, I was going to introduce what this was as well, but as it's your work, please, introduce that, because that's.
Sure. Yeah. That last one was something I worked on through a company called Entropic, one of my favorite places. They had me. Basically, it was for the Grammys, and there was a few different artists that they would provide the edit. Kind of a cut down. I think it was about 15 seconds maybe. And then, there was kind of a look established. And then I love these types of projects where it's not really, there's kind of like a rough idea of which direction to go, but they're open to pushing it further and, trying new things. And so that's what this one is here.
So let's talk a little bit about this. Like, what's that process like? That sort of that movement from getting the brief into starting, starting on the actual piece.
Well, I would say that, one of the things I've discovered or found over the years is that exploration is a really important part of it. So after I get the brief, I think it's a crucial part of the process to experiment, and that's the nice thing about After Effects is, I guess with any digital application, but in my experience with After Effects is that, you've got there's no fear that you're going to go too far. You can always take it back. You can always, tweak different, the keyframes, bring down the levels a little bit much for the values of them if it's going too far. But then there are so many opportunities for happy accidents with all these things that, a lot of times it's kind of mixing and matching plugins, even from different companies, in ways that are unique. It starts off, as you can see here, this is for the Super Bowl. It starts off a lot of times with sketches, and the sketches don't, have to necessarily be, the main function of the sketches is more or less for me to kind of remember what I was envisioning in my mind when I was drawing it, just to kind of, hold on to that idea a little bit longer and maybe work a little bit on the layout and some of those sort of things. So so I would say the first part of it for me is maybe some sketches and some explorations, and then finally, if there's anything related to the meaning or the content itself that could help drive the visuals. For example, let's see, on this one, I guess I could talk about the Super Bowl. The theme was essentially sand, water, fire, and so with that in mind, there is a boat within the stadium of Tampa Bay, and so it's trying to kind of use that as a starting point for where these cannonballs would be shot from. There's a whole internally, even though this might not come through in the final product, a lot of what guides it is the underlying principle of, the fire represents the siege. It's one, team kind of pushing forward on the other. So you can kind of see that I'm trying to create a narrative here with the background of the theme that had already been established by the NFL for the Super Bowl. So, I tried to take motivation from the underlying meaning, because a lot of times, beautiful things can emerge from that attempt to kind of incorporate the idea into the graphics, and it might be kind of underlying it, but another example, I'm not sure if you can pull up, but on the website is a little bit further down. I'm not sure. Should I share my screen? Is that easier to talk about some of these things, or do you want me to just
which one? No, I think this is fine, because it means we can still talk face to face.
Yeah, sounds good. If you wouldn't mind, or someone wouldn't mind pulling up. Let's see.
I'm here for you, Jesse. I'm always here for you. I'm just waiting for your instructions. Beautiful stuff. Love to see, like, a lot of people are really remarking on the chat as to how beautiful your work is. So thanks for sharing with us. Yeah. What would you like to show?
You, well, I was going to say Tencent on the, I think it's a really good example. On the main page, there's Tencent, and that's one where, if you go to just regular jessenewman.com, oh yeah, that one works too. But if you go to, here you can kind of get a sense for it. The idea for this one, and I love these I love incorporating the backstory or the significance of what's trying to be communicated into the graphics. So, for example, on this one, the client wanted me to basically highlight some of the graphics that were on the Golden Record. And the Golden Record, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially something that was sent out on one of the Apollo missions. It's the furthest man-made object from the Earth, and the idea is that another alien civilization or culture would find it in the distant future. And so the starting point was that graphic, and they had asked me to kind of bring it to life, and maybe animate one of the lines showing the trajectory. But then I, for this part, really wanted to make it accurate with the trajectory. So and then I wanted to kind of keep it going beyond the edge of the graphic and move the camera down so that it has a more compelling camera move. And but the second part of it is when you actually zoom into the golden record. And that was interesting for me because the idea was just to highlight the different images that were on the golden record. But again, it was fun for me to say how I'd be curious to see what the visuals would be like for some distant alien. This is what's happening here. What I was trying to communicate was some distant alien technology that's sort of deciphering it. And right there, those are, I think, gosh, I'm going to get the word wrong. I think it's pulsars, but they, within our galaxy, those are a few different points that are on the golden record, and they are theoretically going to be used to help this distant alien civilization triangulate where the Earth is within the galaxy. So I wanted to start off with a two-dimensional, because the golden record is, obviously two-dimensional, but I wanted to create it so that those things would become three-dimensional as the camera's moving into it. And I like the idea of, communicating the idea of some distant technology, distant, geographically as well as, future, sort of scanning over the golden record and trying to decipher any meaning within it. So yeah, that was my interpretation of what it might look like. And again, you want to use visual language that relates to it, with our technology now, if you got something that scans over something, so there's that kind of aspects, and we're kind of familiar with how people might look at information or AI or something and kind of decipher the information. So with those kind of basic understandings of how we would approach it in our current with our modern technology, it was kind of fun to take that as a starting off point and just guess, and just kind of guess what it would be like for some future technology to try to, because you can't go wrong. It's not like someone can say, that's not what they would do. So,
that's it. I mean, if you are proven wrong, we've got bigger problems than
exactly
than that, because we've got an alien invasion.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll be nice, but those are the type of projects that I like the most, where it's kind of nebulously defined, and there's a lot of opportunity to kind of push it in different directions, and I think that's why I really like doing the personal projects as well, because with Rebirth of GAEA and some of the personal other projects that I work on. There's really, you're not constrained, at all. And you can kind of just keep experimenting and exploring. So, I think that those two examples, the Super Bowl and the 10-cent ones, are good examples of kind of taking a base idea and then building off of it.
Yeah. And it's got an amazingly strong, thematic base that then plays into actually pushing forward the visuals. So, I mean, that's obviously where the artistry is, isn't it? And that's something that I think shines through in all of your work. That it has no, thank you. It actually has this very, very strong, thoughtful foundation on which it's built. It's not just pretty flashing things flying all over the place. There's actually a narrative to it. There's something else going deeper behind it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important. It's really important to mention that, because when I'm working, at least what's worked for me has been to start off with the idea. Start off with just kind of close my eyes and imagining, okay, what would this be, and then maybe sketching down some of those ideas. Starting there before I go into After Effects, I never just start with a plugin and try to make something cool, because a lot of times, to make something look really nice doesn't require a whole lot of plugins either. It doesn't have to. I mean, it could. It doesn't have to though. And so if someone out there is trying to learn After Effects, I think that's the best way to learn, because After Effects is one of those applications that it's so broad that there's so many things you can do with it. For me, I feel like if I were to just sit down and how can you cover all of it? And you probably won't need many aspects of it, but you want to dive really deep into other parts of it. So what I've found that works for me is to start off with the idea and then just figure out, go from there, and for what assets I would need. And this is true for anything for both personal and the professional, is just to kind of, first break it down in my mind, or first come up with the idea and then break it down into its smaller pieces. Yeah. And then for each one of those, kind of focus on those insanely and then kind of pull back up. It's a lot of like micro, macro, back and forth, really diving into it and then coming back out, looking at the whole piece, making sure there's a cohesiveness to the whole thing. But yeah, I think it's important at some point to go through all the plugins that you have, for example, just see what each one does. I try to do this every few years, but then just kind of put it in your back of your mind. Oh yeah, there's that one that kind of warps, or there's the one that does really good chromatic aberration, or there's one that does this or that. And not to necessarily try to use that with whatever project comes your way next, because it might not be appropriate for that next project. But there's there's when that is needed, when that effect is necessary in the future, it fits seamlessly with whatever if that future project calls for it. But I wouldn't start with the plugins. The nice thing about the Boris FX plugins is that there's a lot you can do with them, and I use a lot of the distort tools and the blur tools very regularly.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point to hit, that like you go through this whole amount of planning and sketching and making sure that things are kind of like they're set in your mind, but there's a difference when you start to actually work on the machine, because you were saying that there is that amount of not luck, but serendipity is the word that I'm looking for.
Absolutely.
The sort of the happy accidents that come through.
You want to kind of nurture the ability. Yeah, you want to nurture the ability to create those happy accidents. I think that's key. And I just want to, before talking about that, I was just remembering, just 3 or 4 days ago, I was working on the REBIRTH of GAEA video, and I wanted to distort. I wanted to blur out the edges, but I wanted to have a lot of control over it, because throughout the 8.5 minute video, I want to sort of direct the focus of the viewer to different parts of it. So different parts of it are going to go out of focus, and it's not just that the edges are all going to be defocused and this part's crisp, but I want it. Sometimes it's going to be different parts of the frame, and I was just this week was remembering back in 2001, 2002. One of the and I don't think I've used this since 2003, but the Spotlight plugin, using that basically to create the Luma matte for blurring the edge, because then I could, if you're not familiar with Spotlight, basically it kind of emulates a spotlight, and you can move it around. You've got like the white part where it's pointing, etc. But then you can use that information to blur it. And there's other ways to do it. And I know we talked a little bit about this before, but that's just an example of how it's been. Sometimes these things can sit in the back of your mind, but then when you realize, oh wait, there was something I needed that something that I could use for this. So as far as the happy accidents, it's really crucial. Part of what I do is just basically putting things together in ways that are not in which they're not normally combined, and a lot of that comes from the exploration part of the process. And I'm trying to think of what the formula would be to create the happy accidents, and I'll think about it as we're talking, because I'm not sure what
please
the
do.
exact formula is, but I think more than anything, it's just the attitude of being open to it, because there's going to be times where, I'll give you another example, that you might not know how to do a limitation on one aspect of your skill set might actually be what you need to point you to a better solution in a different way. For example, a client of mine recently wanted me to, one of the things I need to do is create a self-illuminating marble. And so the first thing I do, like you're asking, what's the first thing you do? The first thing I do is, I just, it was part of a bigger context of the shot and everything. So I probably did a couple of sketches, but then I wanted just to see, based on my skill set, because every project is different. Sometimes someone needs something that's CG, and then they won't need that again for, I might not need to do CG for another 6 months or something, or compositing, because I do a lot of different types of visual effects. And in this case, the first thing that occurred to me was to go into a 3D program and try to recreate a marble that is self-illuminating, maybe put the light source inside of a sphere and that kind of thing. But glass and water, those sort of things are very, they can be hard to do with CG. And since I don't do it very often, someone who does this all the time could probably do it very quickly. But because of that limitation for myself, I didn't really like the results I was getting. So then I just kind of took a step back and was thinking, okay, a self-illuminating marble, that would be a glass. And I went and I was thinking, I just started Googling for, a glass ball, and there was a bookstore near me that had some of these rocks that I ended up getting and then taking home, putting on a turntable, and just with my iPhone at sunset, I lined it up so that the sun is coming through it and, it's rotating. And then I created this I was able to get this pretty cool element of this, what essentially looks like a self-illuminated marble. And, you can't get anything better than, photoreal to start with. So when possible, I like to start with an element that is actually, based on photos or footage in this case. It saved me a ton of time, and the end result, I've actually been able to repurpose it for all of the stars, for example, in the Rebirth of GAEA video. Each one of those, you could zoom in, all the way, and it would have a lot of detail, and you would see like the sun coming through it. And so yeah, I mean, that's just an example of kind of the attitude of happy accidents. Is more to do, I think, with being open to what you might not have anticipated a solution being. In that case, I started off trying all these different CG things, and then took a step back. Wait, what if I go a completely different direction? And then it turned out great, and then I was able to use it for different, for ways that I wasn't anticipating when I first created it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's something else that I think stands out quite strongly in your work, is that like a lot of your work has these practical elements that are being enhanced by visual effects. And I actually really want to come back to that, but I think like where we're going at the moment leads me to actually want to bring in another couple of people and talk about creativity in a bit more of a broader context. So if that's all right with you, I think we'll take our first little.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's take our first little break, and I want to give away some stuff because I'm in a giving mood today for everyone who's happy. I do see that there have been so many questions pop up in chat. You haven't been forgotten about. We will absolutely get to you. I just need a moment to go through all of the good ones and add it to my huge list of things that I want to talk with Jesse about. But you're watching Boris FX Live with me, Ben Brownlee, and we are talking with Jesse Newman a little bit about Rebirth of Gaia, his a big personal project, but just, you know, more generally about artistry and VFX. But I want to give away some stuff. Are we ready to give away some stuff, Brian?
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Absolutely. You ready?
Oh, good. Good. I think I'm ready. Right. Please give me a name that I cannot pronounce, please. This is my favorite bit. Our first winner of the annual subscription of Sapphire is Nick Adamczyk. Adamczyk. Nick, congratulations on winning the annual subscription of Sapphire. We will be in contact with you very, very shortly about this. I say very shortly, within the next couple of days. If you aren't named Nick Adamczyk or anywhere similar to that, don't fear. There is still time to win more prizes today. All you have to do is head over to borisfxlive.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, enter your name and email address in the lovely little area down there, and you will have a chance to win a annual subscription to the Boris FX Suite. So that's everything that we make, including Sapphire and Continuum and Mocha Pro and Silhouette and Optics. So this is a huge prize going to one more person at some point during this stream. Head on over to borisfxlive.com for your chance to win. Full terms and conditions apply. All right, well, let's change up the pace a little bit. I'm going to bring in Mr. Nick Haraz because we're going to be talking podcasts. Nick, are you there?
I am here. How's it going, Ben?
It's going very well. Very well. Very nice to see you again. Good to have you back. It's been a while. Like,
that's great to be here.
Last live stream.
Maybe the last live stream until the next one.
Yes, exactly. So you have a new podcast.
I do. It's great, actually, just listening to Jesse. Hi, Jesse, and his stories. He was one of the guests on the podcast. It came out 2 weeks ago. It was actually released on my birthday, which was February 15th, and something that I'm very passionate about to have launched, just coming here to Boris FX, and it basically tells stories of creativity. So, in a nutshell. Besides you, who was co-host, thank you, Ben, for that. I get to sit down with four creatives. And on that episode, we talked about finding the creative spark. And I'm really happy with the end result. You guys, I'm sure we'll be giving out some links to this very shortly.
I have a little snippet if you guys would like to hear. You want to hear a little snippet?
Ooh, snip away.
It's a 55-minute clip. Just joking. All right, let's let me see if I can get this going. Hold on one second.
I don't mean art like a painting or a beeple.
Joey Kornman. My first guest is Joey Kornman. He's the founder at School of Motion. Every day he wakes up and gets to help thousands of aspiring motion designers learn their craft and to develop the skills necessary to have a career. I've seen Joey teach quite a few times at Adobe Max, and it was a pleasure to learn from him. This year, he's continuing to work and develop amazing content using his cutting-edge platform for teaching these creative skills online.
I was curious, what does creativity mean to you when you hear it?
I love that question, and I'm a big Seth Godin fan, and he kind of defines it a little differently than most people. Creativity, really, I think it's just the act of making art, and I don't mean art like a painting or a Beeple NFT. I mean taking ideas that have already existed and maybe have existed since time immemorial and recombining them into something new that is uniquely yours. And that could be anything, obvious examples. But I like creativity like Elon Musk. The way he approaches the problem of self-driving vehicles is kind of a novel solution compared to the way other people have done it. That is creativity, and that is art to me. So creativity is really, it's kind of the skill of opening your brain to the collective unconscious where ideas come from and letting them come into your brain and then just put two of them together, and then you've been creative.
A little taste.
Delicious.
Very tasty. Amazing job, Nick. I told you this before. Like we talked a lot about the podcast. I was not prepared for the level and the quality of the conversation that you brought in this podcast. Ben and Jesse, you both were amazing hosts. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a unbelievably wide-ranging, interesting conversation on creativity. It's an important conversation on creativity. So congratulations to that. I'd love to ask you guys all a few questions. Let me start with Nick.
Sure.
The guests you chose, Ben, Jesse, Joey, and I'm forgetting your last guest's name. Who was the last?
Ashley Kennedy and Jen
Ashley.
Jagger as well.
And Jen. So when you're putting together this podcast and you're putting together this conversation, like what is going through your mind as you're thinking about who to talk to?
That's a great question, Brian. For this one, I wanted to touch upon people from different industries and try to bring them all together into a collective conversation. With that said, each of the conversations happen in a one-on-one format. So on some cases, I just had some recent relationship with a YouTuber by the name of Jen Jagger. She has 100,000 subscribers and was like, she'd be fantastic for this conversation. Ashley Kennedy, I've known for a long time and wanted to bring her involved for her reach within the LinkedIn community. Jesse, who I got to know just very recently, and just after seeing his artwork, not just that, but his commitment towards taking his creative concepts and opening them up to people to learn from was just fantastic. His visual effects experience. And then not to mention just Joey Corman. I have one of his books on my shelf, besides being from School of Motion, him talking about the motion graphic community as a whole, as well as I can't forget Ben Brownlee, and just having I wanted to have a member of Boris FX as a co-host in each episode. And I think that when we initially spoke, I had one or two questions in mind to ask him to kind of start and end the podcast. And speaking of a happy accident, I think that it was Ben's answer in one of the initial questions I asked him that really, I think, helps bring people into the narrative structure of the piece. I wasn't expecting that answer from you or to have that connection. So that was just a really happy, nice surprise, which I think helped tie everything together. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your experience on that.
No, thanks. It's a very, like having been one of the guests there, actually hearing what everyone else had to say about creativity and that creative spark was really fascinating to me, because I'm not sure whether this made the final edit, but it's like there were lots of very creative people from very different backgrounds with a lot of shared threads running through. And that's one of the things that actually really struck me quite hard, is that everyone has these their own stories and their own places that they're coming from, but there's something shared about the way that people use their creativity and sort of deal with problems in in their everyday lives, both from a sort of work perspective and but more importantly a personal perspective, that actually it really really touched me quite a bit. That was one of the things that I found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I liked being a part of it as well. Thank you, Nick. I mean, one of the things that struck me was just how applicable a lot of these ideas were to a wide, pretty much anybody who's interested in some of these themes. I like the fact that the podcast is going to be touching on topics that I think that are important, not just creativity, but like work-life balance and those sort of things that not just someone who uses Boris FX or After Effects would gain, some insights potentially from. So that's what struck me about it was, how universal a lot of these things are. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jesse. And Brian, just to kind of draw a conclusion to your question, besides kind of going about to get people, it was more in my approach. I'm just a big fan of a few different shows like This American Life and TED Talks, and they always had multiple people being interviewed at a given time. And I found that type of narrative structure to be really engaging, and I wanted to take some pieces from that and bring that into the podcasts, which it now is.
Well, fantastic job, Nick. I'll bring up the graphic again. The podcast is called Flow State, Stories from the Creative Process. You can get it everywhere: Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. And if you just go to borisfx.com/podcast, we have a nice little page set up there with direct links. You can subscribe to hear the future episodes and hear where Nick takes this. Join the RSS feed. Definitely tune in. Even from I told you before, a wild, grizzled black heart such as mine, you opened me up to an emotional response to some of the questions that I did not think was possible anymore. So great job. Thanks so much for doing it. I look forward to seeing what's coming next.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Cool.
Benjamin, it's
Excellent.
all yours.
Shall we... Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. Right, you disappear off of this four box now. Bye, everyone. Right, we're going to be heading back to our chat with Jesse, and Jesse is going to be showing us some behind the scenes stuff that he's been working on with the GAEA project. Nick, you're more than welcome to hang around and chime in as well, but I don't want to hear anything more from Brian anymore. No, Brian's out. If I could cut his mic, I'd cut his mic, but he's the one that's gone. All right. Well, Jesse, should we take a quick look then at your screen and then see what we've got?
Let me switch over to. Okay, can you see my screen?
We can. Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. So I was just going to give a real quick overview of the GAEA project, and then we could jump into some of the setups. But so this is the final piece, and like for example, I was saying before that if you even if this thing is printed out 12 feet by 4 feet, like this detail up here, can you see my cursor moving?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Like that detail right there is actually, let's see, like this piece here. So you can see all the detail that's in this is contained just within, sorry, I already had it loaded. Well, it's taking a second to reload, but I can start with. Right. I just wanted to show a little bit about the process because I think it helps give it some an overall idea of how it was created. So in this part here, there was one of the vignettes is called "Longing for Uranus," and this is GAEA. The idea is that she's in love with the god of the sky, and so I was just trying to think, how do I envision that? And it seemed like, okay, I'd have her coming up from the ground, from the earth, perhaps made out of mountains, and what symbolizes the sky more than the moon? And so I wanted to make it look like her arm was kind of draped around it. Then up here we've got I think that's is that Demeter? Demeter, and she's just sitting on the corner up there. That's one of the very first photos I took of Emma the very first weekend 15 years ago, because I wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go with this. But basically, for this piece, within GAEA, it's this down here, right? So for each of the vignettes, I kind of show you where it is, and then to give you a sense of how it's created, I had one of the things that Rebirth of Gaia sort of pushed me to do was to learn a little bit more about photography, because I'm so used to fixing it in the post, because I was always the guy who was fixing it in post, that I could take a lot of liberties with how I shot stuff. And so you'll see, in the progression of Rebirth of Gaia, my photography gets better over the years. At first, it was a little bit, perhaps defocused or something. So this is, so I wanted her to hold on to something. And so that was, that's why she's holding on that there. And then, I changed the lighting on her face to make it feel like there's blue light emanating, from the moon itself. And this is, one piece within many. So another example I think might be helpful is back to the nebulaic embryo. This represents the birth of the universe. And so I wanted to have, it started off with this idea. I saw this picture of a galaxy, and it sort of looked like an embryo to me, like the head here and the back. And so at first I was going to, try to recreate it just out of stars. But then, and this is kind of how far I got with that. And I was really going to create the entire image out of stars, but then I had another child, and and it worked nicely to have her represent the birth of the universe. So this is a photo. I know it looks disgusting with this is basically what it is. I took a bunch of pieces of meat and and try to match the lighting so that this is the original photo of her when she was a baby. You can see she only was a couple days old. She still had like the little hair on her, when the newborn, and I kind of covered her with this so that the way I find that works with compositing for me is not to cut any corners. So I covered her entire body with meat, but then only you can see the final image. It's kind of it's just used a little bit here and back in here, but it doesn't prevent me from, if I wanted to, I could introduce a little bit more here or there. But so the idea is that I have the idea of the birth of the universe, and I start looking at some of these different references. I started with some drawings. I was looking at photography that was done in the womb. And, I'm a big fan of Dali, and I really like this idea of him kind of coming out. And then same thing here. You can kind of see this is an earlier piece of mine, digital artwork that, so these sort of, I put these here to kind of show some of the inspiration to get to the final piece. And I took these underwater sort of gelatinous jellyfish pieces to create the umbilical cord, and then combined them all together to get the final piece here. So I just wanted to mention a couple of those so that when you look at Rebirth of Gaia, you realize that that little piece right there contains all those the meat and the gelatinous jellyfish and all that is right in there. So obviously there's not time to kind of go through it all. Before you go too far with that, though, just that the process of covering everything with meat and then only exposing a little bit, was that just to give you the option if you needed to sort of expose any bit of it, then that was already there done for you, so you didn't have to think about 100%. Yeah, 100%. Like when I'm working, I don't use the foreground elements to conceal an error with a composite in the background, or I wanted to have the flexibility to. It's not built like a prop, on a Hollywood set or something where it's just the facade of a building. I wanted to have the flexibility that if I wanted to take him out, like this angel here, or if I wanted to move him left or right, that I didn't have to consider what was going to be behind him. And the same thing goes, flow and meditation is another one of those pieces. Let me pull that one up down here. This is flow and meditation right there. And here she is as a waterfall. So, for example, the animals on flow and meditation, each one of those is, I chose those this is the complicated thing with something like this when you're using photography is you need to make sure the lighting, the camera is relatively similar between them all, the lensing and that kind of thing. But I had to make sure I wanted the lighting to feel as if it was coming from the top left. So everything from the lighting on the animals to the inside of the butterfly wing to even, if she's made out of water, there's a little bit of, you can see a little bit of the water poured onto the animals here and, the reflection of the little animals on her side and everything. But for something like this, what I would do is it's a process of kind of like a left brain, right brain exercise where for a couple of days, I might just cut out every single hair on this animal, but then maybe 3 or 4 other animals as well. And then when I'm kind of moving it all, putting it all together and trying to make it one cohesive image, I will already have lots of elements that are, prepped and ready to go. So I end up doing a lot more work that's actually never really seen. But that's the process that I essentially use for something like this. So here's the flowing meditation within here. So for example, flowing meditation as a separate element, has all these animals, but it didn't really make sense for it to be to have all these animals here. I had these guys. It didn't bother me to kind of cover all of that because I had it as a separate piece. One thing of note here, this took me about 4 months to work on. And when I was done with it, I was showing a friend who asked me if I just took my daughter's face and put it on a waterfall. And that's what actually was the motivation for me to create, the video that kind of shows all the different layers that went into it, because these are mountains from every continent, some from Argentina or in Asia or Africa, all over the place, and but they're all kind of combined together to form this, and so that when I started, the nice thing about having used After Effects as well is when I was putting the video together, it's actually the final resting position of each of the elements is already established in the comp. So it was relatively easy that I could just put a keyframe for the position where they ended up being, and then just drag them off, drag it off and off the frame. And it's that was half the battle right there, was already kind of done just with that. But so let's see. What was the the question again, Ben? I think I just was going off on a tangent there.
Oh no, I think that's fine. I mean, I really think that shows the like the skill of your matte painting is that there are like these hundreds of different elements come together to form this one cohesive image, that the only thing that someone actually notices is out of place is that there happens to be a girl as a waterfall, but everything else is made out of it's as real or as as designed as anything else, but it looks natural, and I think that actually speaks to the skill and the thought inside of it.
Thanks. I think a lot of that comes from the background in visual effects for movies and commercials, where those are things you have to consider when you're compositing, and perhaps it's overkill for something on the my daughter's bedroom wall, but that's one way to look at it. For me, it's when you do this, I'm sure any compositors out there listening, it's like you can't just have the shadows go in one direction for one of the animals and another direction for another. Yeah. So and it's a fun challenge, and when I'm working on, there's so much meaning embedded within each of these pieces as well. I mean, this is supposed to be GAEA. This is supposed to be GAEA meditating, essentially. So it's the idea is, the water is running through her, and there's lots of commentary on the parent-child relationship and that sort of thing. I won't go into all that right now, but there is a tremendous opportunity to kind of weave meaning that goes beyond the original Greek mythology meaning, just like a personal anecdotes and that kind of thing. Just real quick, here's another one, Kronos, where this is a picture of me to depict the Kronos, who's very evil in Greek mythology, and so here it is in the piece. It's up there, And to start with, essentially, I took a picture of myself, and because I couldn't ask somebody else essentially to pose. You look like you'd be a good person to be evil, and so I just used myself and made a kind of crazy looking face. And then at first, I painted this in Photoshop, and it looked pretty interesting. You can kind of see the progression here. Between, this is the first one in Photoshop, but then it still didn't look correct. It seemed like it needed some more texture or lizard skin or something. So, I tried, a lot of them didn't, look at this one. It looks really funny. It doesn't work. But then, as it's going, I'm getting closer and closer and closer. And then by the end of it, there's a lot of attention to detail within even the texture of the lizard skin, where I was kind of morphing it, moving it around so that it sort of adhered to the, the function, essentially, so that, there would be more of a bigger area up here on the cheek, but then the smaller areas around, the edges of the mouth, and try to have it flow into the ear and that kind of thing. So a lot of it's kind of focusing on each element, like I was talking about with the meat before. I would spend, I don't know how much time to create an element like this, but I would create it as if it was like the most, it had to be perfect. It's the most important thing, and really, really focus on it, so that when I took it into the comp, I would feel confident knowing that it was a good base element to start with. Yeah. So, and then I'm not sure if this would be like a good segue, or if you want me to show some of the setups, but this one here is Inception, and this represents the very first spark. Formless ripples of energy. From these formless ripples of energy, in a space devoid of dimension, chaos melts into form. So this was the image for that. And to get to this image, it started off with me just, again, trying to think, how do I represent something that's almost otherworldly, that has like a component of energy, and but it's also rooted in the mythology, within Greek mythology. And I had remembered, and just to give you a sense, again, here's the detail here, but within the overall comp, it's that little pixel up here in the top left. So my kids could be forgiven for not having seen that. But so what I had done was, these are some elements that I had created back in 2000, and I want to say 2002, maybe 2003, for a different project. And at the time, the idea behind these was it was for a show called Unexplained Mysteries, and we ended up not using these elements, but the idea was to sort of communicate an alien radio wave, or that kind of thing. And I was using a plugin to create these shapes, and I really liked it. And we ended up not using it, but at the time I rendered them all as HD, in thinking that I might be able to come back to it at some point in the future and use them. And that's exactly what I did. I used, I think it might have been this one over here, and just took a couple stills from the to create this static image here. And ultimately, I don't know if you want to, if this is the time where you want to kind of step into me kind of showing some of the setups, but this was the one I was going to talk a little bit about.
Let's do that.
Okay. So let me just jump over. This is the video from 10 years ago. And this is the one that I've spent, last few months kind of updating. At the time, it just kind of pulls back on it. But, I recognize that there was a lot of potential that was kind of untapped with this, especially because within the mythology, the idea is that from formlessness comes form. And so what I did was, let me jump over to After Effects. So here it is without anything applied. Let me go a little bit further so you can kind of see as it's pulling back out. So you recognize, this as the piece I was just showing to you. And then I was applying this, it's called, I'm sure you're familiar with it, Warp Bubble 2. Basically, it has a couple different parameters for the amplitude and the motion. But one of the things I hadn't really played with before with these sort of effects was to animate the effect over time so that it starts off completely, formless. This is all random. And this is a matter of, I could increase the amplitude to make it, and it changes completely as I do this. It changes the look as I'm changing the amount of distortion. But as you play it down, and let me pull up the latest one. As you play it down, it'll start. There is a mat here that, for those of you who are familiar with with how these plugins work, basically you use the luminance value or the darkness and lightness to tell After Effects which part would be affected by the distortion, which part wouldn't. And so so in this case, I wanted the whole thing to start off distorted. So that's why it starts off white. Again, this is the information that's being kind of piped into my comp. So this is telling it how much to distort. So it starts off completely white, and then I wanted it to kind of open up a little bit and start to ripple across. And let me show you what that ended up looking like. It'll make more sense, I think, when I show you this. So you'll see it's very distorted, and then right in here, you're going to start to see it. Let me turn off the volume. You can start to see it kind of coming into focus. And then I continued that so that as you're pulling back and you see the nebulaic embryo here, I wanted it to feel like it was still almost kind of like watery, but then also like there was energy being infused into it. So you can control the direction of the distortion and all those sort of things. But again, I thought it was, I hadn't really used the tools in that way before, but this is an example of just starting with the idea, which is to have formlessness turn into form, and in keeping with my, I guess, perspective of not cutting any corners for these sort of effects, I really wanted to make it go as slowly as possible. I didn't want to cheat anything. I wanted to figure out how to make it as smooth as possible, and I also was trying to vaguely make it look like a face. There's an eye here, and kind of like a nose shape in here. And so in a sense, it was kind of like, almost like not really a self-portrait, but something like that, where ultimately this is coming from, born from the mind of a human, and that in this case, like a reflection of a human face there, and then having the eyes sort of melt away and this form kind of emerges. All that makes sense, Ben?
Can I just jump in with yeah, absolutely. I was going to just ask if I could, because it's absolutely stunning. Like if I'm really glad that Brian didn't cut to my face at any point during there, because it would literally just me being slack-jawed, just going, oh wow. It is absolutely gorgeous. And the fact that you've taken and developed that, probably a very unassuming element. I recognize that old plugin as well, because I tried to do something with it many years ago, probably 20 years ago, and never came up with anything as delicious as that. But
I've used it.
That probably leads me to my question. Oh, sorry. No, please.
Oh no, I was just going to say, it's funny. I've used this off and on for years, because the nice thing about, Boris FX and Sapphire is that it's on After Effects and on Flame. And I was on the Flame for about 10 or 15 years and using Sapphire. And so going back and forth between them, it was easy. As an artist, I loved it because I could use the exact same techniques. And so I've had access to this tool for a couple of decades, and it wasn't until the last few months that I really started realizing the potential by animating this map. And then as the piece goes on, I move this around because I want to emphasize different parts, and then also as part of where it's appropriate with the narrative. I mean, there's times where I would want, like in this area here, I didn't want to have any distortion because I was using some live action elements, but then there are other times where it was more appropriate to have some distortion. So having that, basically art directing the amount of distortion in that way was kind of a fun realization for me, for this part here. And kind of actually, since I have these things up here, just as an aside, I had mentioned those stars before. As this is playing down, you can see, let me go to a part where maybe you can see one a little bit closer. Okay, so this element here, it's one of those stars I was talking about. It's the element of the crystal, sphere, the self-illuminated marble that I used for all the stars, because this isn't necessarily, that's another thing about, being a personal project. These aren't necessarily stars, and, they kind of can represent different things. And, but anyways, here's the star element by itself, and I think it's important, again, just to mention some of these things, because I would love for people to understand how a lot of these things can be accessible. Here's the setup. This is my a hallway in my house, and this is the sun coming through the window back here, and just a little turntable, and used my iPhone and just shot this element. And then once I stabilized it and looped it, I had some great things to work with, and here's like one of them, and I shot it different ways. So here's like the final element for that, and this is the sort of thing that I know that there are people out there who can recreate this in CG and probably do it pretty easily, but I can't. And so with my limitations, I try to turn those limitations into an asset. And one of the things that's really nice about this, though, again, there's so much meaning between within the details of Rebirth of GAEA, that one of the things I found is if you flip it, you start to create all these shapes, right? That start to look, the human mind, when you take an organic element like fire or water or something like this, it starts to create shapes that, or faces, or, in this case, I see like wings, all kinds of things. And that is by just flipping it. So that's just look at all, like you see all kinds of really cool, at least I do, a really cool, let's see, where's another good one? Really cool. So the element itself is just a pinprick of light within the video, but even that, I wanted to set it up so that if it went by the camera, because it is a procedural thing where I'm not really placing each of them, if it goes by the camera, to still hold up, and also to have a little bit of meaning within it as well. There's a little bit of some significance to when I'm using it just flipped once versus when I'm using it, where it's flipped like this, because it's a whole different feeling, when it's used more kaleidoscopically. So anyways, since I had that up, I wanted to, since I had that shot up, I wanted to just kind of throw this out there, just to, again, hopefully, someone out there might, okay, it's a good solution that they might have a smartphone, or, it's a good workaround for when you don't know how to create a self-illuminating marble in CG.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that can sometimes, almost paralyze people. They get hardware envy. They look at all the newest and greatest cameras and bits and bobs, and the fact that they don't have that sort of stops them from actually going out and creating anything. But
yeah, I have some strong feelings.
What sort of
about
advice
that.
do you have for that?
Yeah,
I mean, please. That's
I think that those are self-imposed limitations. That whatever, I mean, any computer today would blow away. Any decent computer today would blow away what I was using in 2007 on my laptop to create Rebirth of GAEA. I mean, this whole piece was originally created in on my 2007 laptop, and it takes some problem solving, and that kind of thing. But I would say, as far as I think the most important thing is to kind of convey the idea to. And there really are very few limitations to that right now. Like maybe you can't do it in 4K, but you could render it, in HD, or maybe it'll be a little bit more aliased or something. But it can, it won't prevent you from communicating the idea. In fact, you know what? I wanted to show you one other thing while we're here. Looking at. This just reminded me when I was showing you Inception. There was this piece down here. Or I'm sorry, Nebulaic Embryo. As this piece here. So I did this in 1995, and this was when Photoshop had one layer, and the resolution isn't that high, and this is all created from scratch. So, for example, the clouds and everything, I literally started with nothing, and I just used a smudge tool to create the clouds, and and all the details and the wrinkles in the hand. That's just me with a mouse, trying to duplicate the lightning to make it feel. I wasn't exactly sure. It just seemed like lightning had like a double edge, I wasn't exactly sure why at that point. But all these things, this is painted from scratch with no layers in Photoshop in 1995. The reason why I mentioned that is that I think people can remove that roadblock from their creative process as far as realizing their vision. You don't need to have the latest the latest camera or the latest computer. The most important thing, the thing that people resonate with, is is more like the emotional content of something. And furthermore, nobody looks at a painting from 100 years ago or 500 years ago and says, "Oh, that would have been good if it was animated." I mean, it's you can still communicate the idea that comes through in the Mona Lisa or any of these that people consider classics in art. It's not like you look down on it because it was done with a different medium, and so there's nothing that prohibits people from creating art or expressing themselves, as long as you have a decent computer and and when I say decent, again, I'm saying this whole thing. I updated this top left section, but everything else in here was created on that 2007 laptop. So I would love for people to kind of remove that as an obstacle and just create.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's fantastic advice. It really is. I've got. Can I come in with a couple of questions from chat now? Because
yeah, sure.
I've been hogging you basically with my own questions. So another Jesse asks, there's so much insane detail here, but how do you manage your AE comps? After 10 years of this project, stuff would break, not work, or be outdated. Do you constantly update them? ?
No, so I mean, this is I think I'm pretty uniquely qualified to say that After Effects is backwards compatible. The setup that I'm using right here, I had started in 2000 well, I guess this is just the video, so this would have been like 2010 or 11. But the a big part of this project is the keeping track of the files. And so, I mean, I could just show real quick if it's helpful. Within Rebirth of GAEA, I've got one thing that has the images and one for the videos. And then within the print, let's see, setups. I got it broken down like top left, top right, bottom. So I have that, but then within each of the vignettes, let me see 1 second. Where's all my other setups? Let me go to renders. Oh, here we go. All right, so this will kind of help answer that question. Within each of these, top left, top right, bottom left, what I'll do is I will focus on one vignette, and I'll have a separate folder for that. So, for example, nebulaic embryo, I'll have my pre-renders, the progression, and I just keep everything as organized as possible, so that you can, this will just be layer. So this will be, and I can grab this at any point, and it's been helpful just with redoing the website and with redoing the video. Just knowing I don't have the best memory, so I try to keep things. The way I organize my setups, 10, 15 years ago is the exact same way I organize them now. So I can step back into them if I won't remember the specifics of how I created something, but I'll know how to find how I created it, if that makes sense. So each of these vignettes, so each one of these vignettes, once I am done, like say, for example, this is, I'll render out like the section, with just the top right. And then on top of this, I would add, the guys with the swords and the shields, etc. So it's basically working from the backwards forward, and then focusing on one of the vignettes at a time. And it's going back and forth, obviously. I'll do like the overall. At some point, I think I start off and I just, what's the limitation for Adobe? And it's 30,000 pixels. This is back in 2006, 2007. I'm not sure if that's changed. I don't think it has, but maybe it has. Anyways, I would start with that and then divide that into different sections. And then, for example, maybe focus on, on Chronos for a little bit. You saw before, with all the texture, just really dialing in the detail of the lizard skin. But then when that's done, I would render that out as, let's see, like a pre-render, and then I would have that. So this is what I would have then. The final image, that might not be the final one, but it's close enough for now. But then it's cut out from the background. So then I would take this piece and I would put it on top of, maybe one of these other ones. Like here's one of the top right, or I'd have to go beyond. I had to go back further. Okay, so here's the clouds. This is so even underneath. These things are fully realized, and so I guess it's just like one step at a time, just breaking it down and really dividing it into each of the sections, and then coming up with like a nomenclature and an organizing system that, that works for you. This is what works for me, my setups, and then, just try to keep it really organized. Does that?
I mean, I think it absolutely answers your question. Yeah, because what we're seeing here is some amazing project management, even on a personal project. But that sort of discipline is obviously absolutely 100% necessary. What I'm amazed with, and something that I've never been able to manage is like a lot of my projects from the early to mid 2000s are lost to codecs that don't work anymore, and you seem to have been a bit sort of smarter in that kind of way? Because there's a number of QuickTimes that just won't open because codecs are gone forever.
At the time, I remember you kind of focusing on trying to figure out what codec to use, what compression to use for my QuickTimes, because I actually have I am pretty organized with all of my files. So if you go to my professional work, it's organized within my archive based on California, Atlanta, New York, and then within each of these, you can go down and you can then have it organized by the best projects, and each one of these codecs, for whatever reason, they haven't. This is up in the cloud, but it's I try to use ones that were pretty standard, like JPEG, and then for the QuickTimes, I would use, I think it was Photo JPEG at the time, Photo JPEG compression, and it still works fine. There's a few of resources that I've purchased over the years that use some funky codecs that don't really work, but I guess I've been, JPEGs and PSDs are pretty standard, obviously, and as far as the QuickTimes, just tried to use ones that seem to have longevity. So
yeah, that's much smarter than the mid 2000s Ben. Anyway,
it's kind of scary, but I get kind of made fun of. Well, not made fun of, but I have everything at my fingertips, so I could even go back and show you 1978 drawing of when I was 3 years old or 4 years old, and it's all organized. Perhaps too much. I don't know. It's for me. It's brilliant. Just like I know that it's organized, so I don't have to think about it again, and I just try to. Yeah, it's nice to have it all. I think the project management aspect of it is something that's super important for something like Rebirth of GAEA. Where you really have to have a system in place that that will work for multiple years. That you know how you organize things, and and the other thing I would just say is just having like the discipline to try to stay on top of it, because when you're done with a project, it can be really what's the word? I don't want to. You don't necessarily have the motivation when you're finishing a project to say, okay, I'm going to spend an extra half a day to organize it all and get rid of the things I didn't use, or convert them differently. But I try to do that every several months, maybe every 6 months or something. I'll go through and do that. What I'm playing right now just obviously shows the before and after for the elements that I was using to create the final piece. So these are just, this is just my bedroom. I don't know why, but I didn't shoot it over green screen. I think partly I wanted to keep the fidelity of her hair, like when she was jumping, and I wanted to, and because it was a still in that footage, I didn't mind going frame by frame and cutting it all out. But yeah.
Can we just pop back to Inception for just a moment, if that's all right? Because there's one other question, which was what was the source for that Inception vortex? Yeah,
sure. So the source was from a previous project. It was using a plugin called let me think, I think it's called AE_flame, which is kind of, now that I think about it, kind of strange, because those are the two types of software that I've used in the last 25 years are AE and Flame, but it was called AE and then Flame. Oh yeah, and here's the link to it. So I had, if you're curious, I have a lot of this information for each of the pages. So Jesse Newman, and then Project Inception will show you that the element that I started with was just one of those explorations for a project that I had used, that I'd done maybe 20 years ago. That wasn't used for that project, but I really liked the element a lot, and so at the time everything was standard definition, but I set it up to render. I must have at that point taken a long weekend or a week or something to render these elements as HD, but it was they're very random and they're very kind of otherworldly, and that's the element that I started with, and so then I would take stills from some of these to create this. And then it's kind of, and then this was a still, and then on top of this, I went and added the distortions back on top of it. So, it's kind of, it's almost kind of like jazz, where it's just like improvisational and, kind of throwing something on top of something and then, that's where it's very hard sometimes to perhaps know how it's being created because there's just so many layers that go into it. It's also a combination of some photos from NASA. And the NASA photos are great. By the way, those are, for those, in case you don't know, those are public domain. We all, as citizens own them. So you can use, they've got incredible photos. They're all really high resolution. And so that's what the other photos. So it was a combination of those pieces that I generated and some NASA photos. And a lot of love and late nights.
And a lot of love. I think how has like the hardware and software development changed your creative process? Because obviously we're looking at something here that started many years ago, and the thought of rendering HD footage out over a weekend, doesn't seem to resonate as much anymore.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. A lot of the render time issues. I mean, those are. I guess I'm just used to it. When I first started, I'm still rendering the video right now that I'm rendering for Rebirth of Gaia. Some of these layers, I have it broken down into. This might be helpful to know. It starts off with. Here's the render without. Let me hide everything else. First, I rendered the whole thing with just the stars. So this doesn't have any of the distortions on the edges. It just has the stars. And the reason why I'm showing you this is to say, like, some of these renders, they're 8.5 minutes long. It's one camera move, so there's no like quick way around it. Some of these renders take a week, to do just this one. And this is today, and I'm running a Mac Pro with 384 gigs of RAM, and it still takes a week. And so I think that the render times are a lot of times they have more to do with your level of patience, like what you're willing to put up with. Because also it's a matter of maybe one of the things that's nice about a project like Rebirth of Gaia is sort of a long-term multitasking, where maybe it'll be rendering for a while or just in the evenings or something, but then I could be working on something else and then, come back in a week and kind of pick up where that render was. But as far as the technology itself and how it's changed, this section here is the only one that I've redone of the whole piece. This is the only part that's new. I did in 2021. The rest of it was 2011, 2012 mostly, that was finished. But the technique for this was extremely, my process was very, very similar for doing this one. And I'll just show you real quick. Oh, by the way, I have to, this might be of interest. Like, you remember I was showing you the distortions here. So after, I was just showing you the version that just had the stars, and then I add the distortions on top of the stars, and then I add the blur, and then I do a final color correct, and then I have there's a little bit of a key that I have on the bottom of the piece. Let's see if I can pull that up real quick. So these are the orders. This is the order that it goes through. It goes through. The key is just to kind of show you where it is as the video is playing down. This thing is moving around. To kind of show the viewer, what part they're looking at. You can see it down here. It's kind of small. It's subtle, but it's like a little, key. So basically, it starts off with the stars, and then I go to the distortion and then the blur. But if you look at these versions, this is version 173 for the distortion, and so I mean, and then I'm not sure what version I'm on with Blur 56. I mean, these things, I've got a lot of different versions, and the same thing is true for let's see, the Cosmic Mind. That's the one I just finished. So here's the final piece. But then if you were to look at, there's like the progression over time. It started off being much different. It didn't have any faces in it. This stuff here, this is going back 10 years. But when I was redoing it last year, I did a ton of iterations. I don't know if this is going to come through very well, but this is my mom. I took a picture of the beach, and then I inverted the photo to create like streaks around her eyes, like light energy, and like little marks on her skin became like constellations in the sky. There's some like underlying meaning to that as well. But the reason why I'm showing you this is just to give you a sense of the progression over time. It was exactly the same way that I had worked previously, where I just it's almost like a found art project. Like I'll take something from an asset from stock footage, then I'll mix it with the photo of my mom, and then I'll mix it with 1,000 other photos. And just keep doing iterations until something really resonates. And these are all just different, live action components that I was just experimenting with. But the point is that even though 10 years had passed, for me, this is a technique that I was comfortable with. So I was able to work faster than I was 10 years ago for sure. But some things hadn't changed. And one of the things that hadn't changed was just the process of just doing a ton of iterations.
Yeah,
here's like, for example,
there we
just real quick, here's like
show for it. Yeah.
The before and after for something like this, where it just took a picture of her from a few years ago, and then and I told her what I was going to be doing. She doesn't normally walk around with her lips pursed like that, but I said, pretend you're blowing dandelion, and I took this picture, and then I used it for here, but I also used it on the outside too. And there's a whole reason behind that with the significance between this. Has a lot to do with manifesting destiny and some of the other some other concepts, but so. Starting with an element like this, you can tweak it and, get from here to here, same thing like this. Like the elements that I'm starting with are not crazy. This is, you can see all the compression on this. It's not, but you can turn it into something like this.
Now, see, that's something that really speaks to me, because I am constantly getting mocked for my love of kaleido effects. And yet you managed to make it look cool. So I'm going to say to everyone who hates all of my kaleido effects that, Jesse Newman thinks they're cool. So therefore, with a bit of thought
Ben,
behind
I never
them,
said that.
They are cool.
I'm just joking.
Oh no!
you know that's gonna pull me. You know that's gonna pull me in here. I'm not sure your kaleidoscope effects look like that. I will say though, what I've always loved about Jesse's work, and specifically with Sapphire, is when I look at some of these comps. To be honest with you, I have no idea which Sapphire effect he's using. And it's some of those warps and distorts, they really are like 1 in 100 different pieces that you're using to create that. And it's always fascinated me to be able to look at some of your work and think like, because I know you're like, I'm using this, I'm using that. And I'm like, where is that? But that's the real skill, right? They really are Like you're using them like paints in a palette, and not like dumping powdered sugar all over the top, where that's all you're tasting. It really is a kind of beautiful mix. So always love to see that, even when it comes to your Kaleido effects.
And on the website too, there's as you know, Brian, but for anyone out there who's interested in more like the technical side of things, it actually walks people through how to do some of these effects and create these distortions. But with what you're saying, Brian, I think it's important to note too that the plugins, any one of those are just starting points. They sort of to make them unique, to make them your own. You want to combine it with other plugins or use them in ways that they're not necessarily intended to be used. One of the things that I do sometimes is I just take these sliders. You can see me doing this here in the tutorial, and I don't have like a preconceived notion of, it should be blur the lens at 25 and do this. It's just more of me moving things around and again being open to the happy accidents that could emerge from that sort of process. If that makes sense. So in this case, I would, this is a piece of fabric that I'm trying to distort to make it look like his angel wing. Have it blend into here we go. Having it blend into here, right? So it's a very subtle, but I wanted it to be kind of, you're not sure if it's fabric. It looks like it's fabric here, but then there's some weird, way that it kind of blends in with the background and picks up little reflections and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I would just point out to anyone who's kind of, either getting into it or is just to know that these are all starting points. Even that the presets that come with a lot of these plugins, these are really great starting points. But then you can, go a lot. You can take it a lot further and make it your own.
Definitely.
One of the things that I really enjoyed, because I was looking at your website as I often do since Brian introduced me to your name. I was like, I often sort of just go there to drool. And one of the things that really struck me is that like you've often got like screen captures of you just working. Is that something that you consciously do, or is that just something that you do occasionally?
It's kind of funny. I do it constantly, but I have been doing it for 15 years, which I was just thinking about this week that, I think it's helpful when I started doing this, the screen captures back when I was first started on GAEA. I don't remember exactly what my motivation was at the time, but I quickly realized how helpful it would be to have them because when I'm looking at somebody's work, even if I see like a before and after, it doesn't help me too much because it helps because it's always helpful to see what they started with, but it doesn't fill in all the blanks. And I think that by having the screen captures and then taking them and kind of editing them down and putting them to music so it's a little bit more digestible, it really helps to show the entire process. And by that, what I mean is it shows all the explorations. And I wouldn't call them wrong turns or anything. I think a lot of times they're an important part of the process to have gone in these different directions and try different things. I think it's, if you go again, I think the best example of that, or one of the examples of that, you can see it with the Super Bowl. Actually, if you go back to the process page, it has a lot of those that you're talking about, where it shows the process of it being created. And I think it's an important instructional tool to kind of see exactly how things came about, and where I kind of pivoted to a different direction. And I have massive gaps in my knowledge. So you might wonder, how come he's not doing that keyboard shortcut? But I think I have to reserve that part of my brain for remembering my kids' teachers' names and things. So I can't fill it up. So I tend not to know too many too many of these shortcuts, but at least I think it perhaps is helpful just to kind of see, how I go about not just what tools I was using, but okay, first he tried to do this, and then he tried to do, and then he took it in this direction. I even have like my notes, notes to myself as I'm working, like what is the golden ratio, besides all the background. Like I was saying before, the process of an alien civilization decoding the golden record to view its images, and a lot of this I get from the internet, and it helps to I guess inform the direction of the graphics as well. But yeah, I think that having these, hopefully, I mean, I do them. I think it's kind of fun to look back and kind of see how it all came together. But I also hope that it's helpful to people out there in case they're curious about, how do you go from A to B?
I think, and I absolutely think it is. I think like I really enjoy seeing other people's processes, just because I think I've been doing this for a little while now as well, and you kind of you find your own path, and it's actually really nice to have to be able to look over and see what someone else is doing, and just go, actually, it's the way that I'm walking the actual right direction, or have I just been, is this just the path that I set myself on? And so sort of seeing, should I deviate a little bit? Is that a better technique? And actually looking, if it almost feels like you're looking over your shoulder, which is, which is definitely a privilege, and not something that a lot of artists let you do.
Well, one other thing I'd mention about that too is nowadays, it's so much easier just in the last, for me, to have discovered some of these, the ability to record your expression as you're going too, because it's kind of fun to have it captured, those moments where I am just like, you can see my face light up when something kind of comes together, and serendipitously, when those happy accidents come, it's kind of, it's kind of fun just to know that you can see the way I'm reacting as well. But yeah, something like this, I think it's important to. I was going to say, even like for this part here, to this is just a picture of my daughter. You get to see how it kind of comes together, and all the details of, okay, she's looking at this at the how you get, so there's no edges that are light behind her eye. All those little details I think help. Perhaps might help someone understand like how to the nitty gritty of how to do it.
I can't stress much how helpful this is for everyone, including myself, right? To see your process. And I love the fact of where we're at right now, that you are sharing, and like, it's not just you, right? There's definitely a movement now of a lot of people showing how things are made. I can definitely remember a long time ago sitting in a flame suite and, being told to turn my back, to not see what the artist was doing, right? Because there was ego involved, right? And there was very much like no, this is almost like a secret.
Really? That's interesting. I'd never heard that. I was
absolutely. It was a sapphire glow as well, which is beautifully ironic at this point. But I will say, I'm not quite sure where that technique got that artist, and I absolutely know where your technique is going to get you as an artist, right? So it's definitely no mystery which is the right way to go. But it is amazing that you are showing everything and your whole process. If I was young and aspiring, I would be sucking this up, like
It's interesting that you say that, Brian, because I was a flame artist, obviously, for several years with client sessions, and a big part of it was, I can't imagine asking the person to not look as I was working. It would have been a lot different dynamic. But I think it's I'm an open book. I mean, I would, if there's, I love doing these sort of things. I love sharing all this information. Yeah, it's a privilege to be on here and to be able to share some of this with with anybody. One thing I would say, if you are kind of starting off, is to, I really, really, really recommend personal projects to motivate you to learn it, because for several reasons. One, these programs are so massive that you kind of have to focus on one part, or else it's just too overwhelming. But then also, a personal project is one that you can't really quit. If you're doing it, something like, if a friend of yours has got a band and you're going to do a music video for them, or if your parents have a anniversary coming up and you want to make a card for them, or whatever it is, you can't not do it if the computer crashes. There's so many times where I was doing videos over the years for Emma when I was learning. That's how I learned Flame, and it's how I learned After Effects, was creating videos for her. And there's so many times where that was like my Christmas present for her, or her birthday present or something. And the computer crashed like 2 nights before. And, at one point I lost all the assets when I was, for one of them. And, but you just can't show up empty-handed, for one of these events. So it makes you keep going. And at the end of it, you've got something that it has a little bit more significance to, that you could kind of hold on to. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned as well, is that these personal projects tend to be a lot more timeless, than some of the professional ones in terms of, these earlier things that I had done for my kids or for Emma, when she was the only one, I'm still looking at them now, as opposed to, I don't know. It just seems like there's the emotional content of doing the personal projects. There's a reward in that as well. That's where I would recommend starting.
Now, Jesse, we're going to have to start finishing up very shortly, unfortunately. I mean, I could obviously stay here for forever, because I've not got through any of the stuff that I wanted to cover. I think I've asked 3 of my actual questions, and there's so much to go through. But I respect that you've given us a lot of your time already. Before we get to the last questions, though, and I do have a few last ones, I just want to say to everyone watching, if you are enjoying this and you want to see more stuff like this, then please hit the thumbs up button. I know I haven't really said that a lot this live stream, and I try to say it a bit more, but like, it actually does help us out to let us know that you're enjoying what you're seeing, and it also helps the those sort of weird gerbils in the YouTube servers sort of do their weird gerbil thing. We don't know what they're doing. It's some sort of dark mystery, but please hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying this, and you want to see more stuff. There is also literally minutes. We got a few minutes before we do the big competition prize. So if you do want to throw your hat in the ring at the very, very last minute, and try to win the Boris FX Suite annual subscription, so that's everything we do, go over to borisfxlive.com and put your name and email address in the little box at the bottom. Full terms and conditions are there, but do it now, because you won't have time by the time I finish asking my last questions. All right, Jesse, are you ready? You ready for? I'm going to try and do some fast ones. Unfortunately,
yeah, let's do it.
I think the big one, and the one that's been hanging over our heads for this entire chat: why After Effects and not Photoshop?
Okay. Well, when I started this in 2007, essentially, there's several reasons. One of them is that in Photoshop, again, this is talking about, I'm not sure if this has changed because once I started doing this in After Effects, I never really went back. But at least at that point in Photoshop, if you were to duplicate a layer, and if it was like 1 megabyte, then all of a sudden the project becomes 2 megabytes. And if you duplicate it 10 times, it becomes 10 megabytes. Whereas in After Effects, when you duplicate it, it's just referencing an instance. So it kept my project files much smaller. Another aspect of it was that I could easily pre-comp with After Effects. It was easier for me to it was easier for me to basically organize it in a way that I could focus on each of the vignettes. And oops, sorry. I'm not sure if you could hear the audio or not, but I could focus on each of the vignettes and then render those off as pre-comps and bring them into a final comp. Another one, probably the most important though, was After Effects to me was kind of like working with oils instead of acrylics, where the canvas remains wet. You can go back a month, a year later, 10 years, 15 years later, and essentially go back and rework things. Now, what that allows you to do is to take risks, to experiment, to try things you might not do. For example, if you're in Photoshop at that time and hit blur, it baked it into the pixels. You couldn't go back the following day and say, make that value 10 instead of 12. You were kind of, you were locked into it. So I have found that process really liberated the creative side of things because I can push it as far as I want, save off different iterations. And then the final reason was I realized pretty early on that creating these videos was going to be a really nice part of it. And having it already built within After Effects, like I was just explaining before with flowing meditation, having it within After Effects allowed me to relatively quickly animate it on. I know I could have brought it in from Photoshop, brought Photoshop file into After Effects and done something similar. But like I was saying before, it allowed me to work in a way with these massive files and with all these files that kept the project file small, the After Effects project file small. And there was one more reason I think. Let's see. Yeah, those were the main ones. A familiarity with After Effects. I already had a lot of the plugins for After Effects, as opposed to I wasn't really using Photoshop too much because professionally I used After Effects a lot, so I had that kind of already set up. Yeah. Does that all?
I think that's actually a really, really good point. Is the plugins issue was like Photoshop has historically not had things like the Sapphire plugins up until very recently, where now you can get the Sapphire plugins in Photoshop. But obviously, using Sapphire and brings out a whole other set of tools for you to be able to use.
Oh, and one more thing about that I think is really important too is I was able to use proxies. I mean that was essential. I mean when I was doing all this, it was essentially on my laptop. On my commute to and from the city, I did most of Rebirth of GAEA, and it was. Well, not most of it, but I did a lot of it. And I needed something, I needed to be able to work in a way that typically I would create proxies that were maybe 1/3 resolution, and that allowed me to work a lot quicker. Again, I'm not sure if there was a way to do it in Photoshop back then, or if there's a way to do it now. Like I said, I use After Effects a lot more than Photoshop. So, but at least at the time, I didn't know how to do it. If there was a way, and working with the proxies was great because the entire time I'd be working with proxies, and then I would hit render and obviously would substitute the other photos for it.
Yep. The canvas remains wet. What a great line! What a great line!
I love that.
I'm gonna totally steal that. I hate
to be stealing it. Yeah, that's brilliant. Jesse, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I like the feedback we've already gotten live has been absolutely amazing as well. If you're watching a replay, if you haven't managed to watch this live and you are watching a replay, then feel free to add into the comments at the bottom as well, because we do read those, and I will send the nice ones over to Jesse. I will send all the nasty ones into the bin. No, that's not what I'll do. They just won't go very far. Jesse, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, man. This has been awesome.
Honestly,
it's a pleasure.
It's great to hear you. And we must do it again.
Well, I'm an open book, so anytime.
That's it. Fantastic. Great. Well, Jesse Newman, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
My website, jessenewman.com. That's probably the best way, because from there you could, if there's other websites that have, like, for example, I've got NFTs up on OpenSea, and you can get there from my website. But probably my website would be the best way.
Sounds like a good plan. Everyone, go to jessenewman.com now. Do it. Actually, not everyone. Everyone else stay around for just a few minutes. Jesse, I will talk to you again very soon. But thank you very much. Thanks, thank you for being part of Boris FX Live.
All right. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you very much. Folks, we are going to say goodbye in just a minute. But before we do that, it's the moment no one's been waiting for, except the one lucky person who is going to be winning the prize of the day, which is Boris FX Suite annual subscription. That is everything that we make, including Sapphire that we've been talking about today, but also the Continuum Suite and Mocha Pro, and of course, Silhouette and Optics. So if we are ready, I would like a cheesy sound effect and the last name, please. There we go. Here we go. And the winner is Alba Gonzalez Newlander. Alba Gonzalez Newlander. Well done. Congratulations, Alba. You have won our annual subscription to the Boris FX Suite. Congratulations to you. For everyone else who didn't win today, I think actually you did win, but just by watching this was worth more than any Boris FX Suite ever possibly could be. That's true. Actually, I think so. If you haven't done some already and you have enjoyed what you've seen so far, hit the thumbs up button and help us out for the next stream. We are going to be streaming again in just a couple of weeks. So join us for that. If you want to be up to date on what's going on, hit the subscribe button. For all other Boris FX Live news, head over to borisfxlive.com. But for now, from me, Ben Brownlee, and all the members of the team at Mission Control, thank you very much for joining us. I'll see you again soon.